You are late with the order again, Maya. Do it again, and you are out.
I am the owner of this diner. And I have seen everything now.
Charles Whitmore entered the Lantern House through the kitchen door, wearing a faded gray hoodie, borrowed work boots, and a paper cap pulled low over his silver hair. No one recognized him. That was exactly what he wanted. The restaurant was his restaurant. He had bought the first location with money earned from a delivery route, built the company into a chain, and named every dining room after the brass lantern his mother kept beside their apartment door. But for 6 months, he had stayed away from the floor. His executives sent him polished reports, smiling photographs, and carefully edited videos of happy guests. The reports said sales were strong. The photographs showed spotless tables. The videos showed managers congratulating themselves beneath warm pendant lights. None of them showed the woman behind the coffee station, lowering her eyes as a man in a black suit shouted at her. Charles heard the shouting before he saw the speaker. "You call this service?" Victor Haynes snapped. "The booth has been waiting 8 minutes." The woman stood with a tray balanced against one hip. She was young, perhaps in her late 20s, with warm brown skin, shoulder-length curls tied back by a burgundy headband, and a navy uniform beneath a cream apron. Her name tag read M-A-Y. A drop of coffee trembled near the rim of one cup.
I understand, Victor. It won't happen again. I will be faster.
The kitchen sent the order late, Maya said. "I told the guests it would be another minute." "Then you should have learned how to make the kitchen move faster." Victor leaned close enough for the other servers to hear. "If you embarrass this restaurant again, I will make sure you never work in this neighborhood." Maya did not answer. She carried the tray away, placed the coffee on the table, and apologized to the waiting couple without mentioning Victor. Charles watched her hands. They were steady, but the fingers of her left hand were pressed tightly against her apron. He took a seat at the counter. "Coffee?" Maya asked. "Black," Charles said, roughening his voice. "And whatever is cheapest. That will be the chicken soup." "Soup for breakfast." The soup does not judge people. It was the first time that morning anyone had made him smile. Maya set down the coffee and soup. She did not know that the old man in the hoodie owned the building, the brand, the recipes, and the company whose name appeared on the stock exchange. She only knew that he looked cold and tired. She brought him a second slice of bread without charging him. At 11:17, while Victor stood near the register pretending to review sales numbers, Maya slid a folded receipt beneath Charles's bowl. "Do not read it here," she whispered. Charles kept his face blank. "Is it the bill?" "It is a warning." She walked away before he could ask another question. Outside, in the narrow alley behind the restaurant, Charles unfolded the receipt. On the back, in small blue handwriting, were 12 words. "Your manager is stealing from the staff." He checks the cameras at 11:17. Under the sentence was a second line. "Please do not tell him I wrote this." Charles read it 3 times. Then he looked up at the back wall of the Lantern House, where a security camera pointed toward the alley. Its red light was dark. He had been told every camera in the restaurant was working. For the first time in months, the polished reports from his executives began to feel less like information and more like a locked door. Charles did not go back to his penthouse. He went to the company archive and asked an assistant to pull every payroll adjustment, employee complaint, supplier invoice, and camera maintenance record from the Lantern House for the previous year. The assistant asked why. Charles said he was conducting a routine.
The numbers do not lie. He is stealing from the staff every single day.
Review. The first discrepancy appeared in the tip pool. The restaurant had collected enough service charges to distribute an additional $4.80 per shift to every server. The payroll reports showed a smaller amount. The difference had been labeled administrative reconciliation. The same phrase appeared every week. The second discrepancy involved overtime. Staff members worked late after closing, but their time cards ended at 10. The missing hours were not random. They belonged to employees who had no relatives nearby, no savings, or no confidence that anyone would believe them. The third discrepancy was a string of camera repair invoices. 6 cameras had supposedly failed on 6 different nights. Every failure occurred between 11:10 and 11:25, exactly when Victor closed the register and moved cash envelopes from the office to his car. Charles should have called the police. He should have suspended Victor, secured the records, and announced his identity. Instead, he returned to the Lantern House the next morning in a different disguise. This time he wore a stained delivery jacket and introduced himself as Hank. He wanted to know whether Maya had warned him because she was honest, because she hated Victor, or because she had been placed near him by someone who understood the investigation better than he did. Maya recognized him immediately. "You are the soup man," she said. "I've been called worse. You came back. The soup was good." She studied his face. "You did not read the note here." "No, did Victor see it?" "Not that I know." Maya exhaled, but the relief lasted only a second. "Then leave before he notices you." "Why did you write it?" Her expression closed. "Because I have seen what happens when people ask questions out loud." At the far end of the dining room, a busboy named Andre dropped a stack of plates. Victor turned toward the noise. His eyes moved across the room, measuring who had stopped working and who had looked down. Maya lowered her voice. "He keeps a second ledger. Not in the office. Somewhere only he can reach." "What is in it?" "I do not know. But every time someone complains about missing tips, Victor tells them the company will investigate. Then their shifts disappear." "Why have you not gone to the company?" Maya gave a quiet laugh. "Which company?" "The people at the office send Victor congratulations every quarter. He knows how to make a bad place look profitable." Charles felt the answer land harder than the accusation on the receipt. The company was not failing to notice Victor. The company was rewarding him. That evening, Charles watched Maya close the diner. She checked every table, placed uneaten bread in containers, and divided leftover soup into small cups for the staff. When Victor told her to throw it away, she waited until he left and carried the food to the back steps. A teenage dishwasher accepted a cup. Andre accepted another. Maya kept the last one for herself. Charles stood in the alley and understood that her kindness was not a performance. She was protecting people who could not protect themselves, even while she was afraid. The next week, Charles made the disguise more convincing. He shaved his beard unevenly, wore a wool coat with a missing button, and carried a battered suitcase. He rented a room above a closed pharmacy under the name Henry Cole. During the day, he ate at the Lantern House. At night, he read the reports his legal team sent him and compared them with what he saw on the floor. Maya noticed everything. She noticed that he always sat where he could see the kitchen door. She noticed that he never touched the television mounted above the bar when the news showed the Whitmore Foundation. She noticed that his hands were too smooth for a man who had spent years sleeping outdoors, and that he knew how to read financial statements when a newspaper was left open on the counter. She did not expose him. Instead, she began leaving him small pieces of information. A supplier changed delivery times after Victor made a private deal. The refrigerator in the basement had been locked for 3 months. A former server named Tasha had been fired after asking why her paychecks did not match her hours. Maya never wrote more than necessary. She never signed her name. One rainy night, Charles found her outside the staff entrance with tears in her eyes. Her Aunt Nora owned the small property where Maya lived with her younger brother Eli. Nora also owned the Lantern House before selling it to Charles years earlier. Maya had kept working there because the restaurant was the only stable employer in the neighborhood. Victor fired Andre, Maya said. For what? For refusing to sign a false time card. Did he threaten you too? He threatened everyone. I am just the one who wrote things down. She reached in her apron and pulled out a folded packet. Inside were copies of pay stubs, photographs of handwritten schedules, and a list of employees who had worked unpaid closing hours. Why keep these? Charles asked. Because paper is harder to intimidate than people. He wanted to tell her who he was. He wanted to promise that the man who had stolen from her would be gone by sunrise. But if he revealed himself too early, Victor might destroy the second ledger, frighten the staff, and blame Maya for everything. You should give these to a lawyer, Charles said. I cannot afford one. Then give them to someone who can. Maya looked at him. Are you offering? Charles heard the question beneath the question. She was not asking whether he had money. She was asking whether he was safe. I am offering to listen before I decide what I can do. She nodded. That is more than most owners do. The next morning, Victor placed Maya's name on a termination list. Charles learned this from a human resources report that arrived at the company headquarters. The stated reason was repeated customer complaints. There were no complaints attached. When Charles asked the HR director for supporting documents, she said Victor had always handled disciplinary matters locally. Who authorized that practice? Charles asked. The director hesitated. The regional office. And who runs the regional office? She did not answer. Charles ended the call and opened a sealed file from the year before. His father had created a private board committee to manage the company if Charles ever became unavailable. The committee included his uncle Martin, his chief financial officer, and 2 directors who had never visited a restaurant after midnight. A note from his late father was clipped to the file. If the floor stops speaking, the office will begin lying. Charles had laughed at the sentence when he first read it. Now it sounded like a confession. He asked his security chief, Alina Reyes, to investigate Victor without alerting the regional office. Alina placed 2 auditors inside the restaurant as temporary maintenance workers. She also checked the camera system. The cameras were not broken. Victor had installed a private network that copied selected footage to a hidden server. On the first night, the auditors captured Victor meeting a representative from a rival chain in the basement. The representative offered him money to convince the board that the Lantern House locations were losing value. Victor would then help sell the original properties at a discount. The second night revealed something worse. Victor opened a locked refrigerator and removed a black ledger wrapped in plastic. He did not count cash. He counted names. Maya's name appeared on the first page. Charles watched the footage in silence. The ledger contained every employee who had challenged Victor. Beside each name were notes about rent problems, immigration fears, sick relatives, and family debts. Victor had turned private hardship into leverage. When Maya arrived for the morning shift, Charles was waiting at the counter as Hank. He wanted to warn her immediately. He wanted to tell her the ledger existed. Instead, he asked whether Eli had made it to school. He has a science project due, Maya said. A model bridge. Does he need help? He needs cardboard and patience. I have one of those. She gave him a suspicious look. Which one? Cardboard. For the first time, Maya laughed. The sound was brief, but it changed the room. Even Charles felt the tension loosen. Then a little girl at booth 6 began choking on a piece of apple. The diner froze. Her mother screamed. Victor shouted for someone to call emergency services, but Maya was already...
Stay calm. Breathe with me. Everything is going to be okay now.
moving. She dropped to her knees, positioned the child, and gave clear, controlled instructions. Within seconds, the apple came free. The girl coughed, cried, and clung to her mother. Victor looked furious that the crisis had been solved without him.
Get back to work, Maya. We have paying customers waiting for service.
You left your station, he said. A child was choking. You are not trained to make medical decisions. I did not make a medical decision. I helped the child breathe. The room heard every word. Victor told her to clock out. Maya removed her apron, folded it carefully, and walked to the back. Charles followed her. He cannot keep doing this, Charles said. He can if everyone keeps pretending he is untouchable. What if he is not? She looked at him for a long time.
Who are you really? Why were you watching us all this time?
Are you the owner? The question stopped him. Rain tapped against the back door. Somewhere in the kitchen, a pan clattered. Charles could have lied again. He had built the disguise to observe people without the pressure of his name. But the disguise had begun to cost Maya more than it cost him. Yes, he said. Maya did not gasp. She simply closed her eyes. Which owner? Charles Whitmore. Her face changed. Not into admiration. Into disappointment. You knew. I suspected. I needed proof. You needed proof while he threatened our jobs. I was trying to protect the investigation. You were protecting your company. He had no answer. Maya placed her folded apron on the chair. You sat at that counter and let me believe you were another person who needed help. You let me risk everything to warn you. I am sorry. Sorry is not protection. She walked away, but not before turning back. If you are really Charles Whitmore, then stop watching and start choosing. The words followed him into the rain. That night, Charles made the choice he had postponed. He called an emergency board meeting for the following morning. He ordered a freeze on Victor's access, summoned independent counsel, and asked Alina to secure every ledger and server. He also invited Maya, Nora, Andre, Tasha, and 3 other staff members to speak directly to the board. The regional office tried to cancel the meeting. Charles told them the meeting would happen without them. At 9 the next morning, the boardroom filled with people who had never stood in a kitchen at closing time. Martin Whitmore arrived first, carrying a folder and a practiced expression of concern. He was Charles's uncle and the chair of the regional board. He had spent a year telling everyone that Charles was too emotional to manage the company after his wife's death. Victor entered behind him. Maya came last. She wore the same Navy uniform, but no apron. Her burgundy headband was tied neatly, and the folded packet of evidence rested in both hands. Martin looked at her. This is an executive meeting. Then listen like an executive, Charles said. The room turned toward the door. Charles was no longer wearing the hoodie. He wore a dark suit, no tie, and the expression employees had seen only in framed photographs. Victor's face lost its color. Mr. Whitmore, he said, you call me Hank for 3 weeks. Martin stood. Charles,
This evidence proves the systematic theft and abuse within my own establishment.
unnecessary. We can address operational complaints through the proper channels. The proper channels reported Victor's numbers as excellent. Charles placed the payroll audit on the table, then the camera records, then the rival chain's payment offer. Finally, Alina connected the hidden server to the screen. The first video showed Victor removing cash envelopes at 11:17. The second showed him meeting the rival representative. The third showed him opening the black ledger. Victor stared at the screen. That footage is illegal. You installed the system, Alina said. The company owns the building and the network. Martin tried to interrupt. Charles raised one hand. No more explanations from people who were not there. He invited Maya to speak. She did not read from her notes. She described the missing tips, the unpaid hours, the threats, and the employees who stopped complaining because every complaint cost them a shift. She described the little girl in the diner and the moment Victor cared more about authority than safety. Then she opened the packet and placed the receipt on the table. The note was small. The truth behind it was not. Martin looked at Charles. You are going to destroy the company over a restaurant manager. No, Charles said. You helped destroy the company by treating people as numbers. Martin's expression hardened. Be careful. I have been careful for too long. He turned to the board. Victor is terminated for cause. The regional office is suspended pending an independent investigation. Every employee in the affected locations will receive back pay, restored hours, and a confidential reporting channel outside management. The company will publish the correction internally and externally. Victor laughed once. You think the staff will trust you because you walked into one diner wearing a costume? Maya looked at Charles before he answered. No, she said. They will trust him only if he keeps showing up after the cameras leave. Charles nodded. She is right. That was the moment the room changed. Charles did not offer Maya a dramatic promotion. He did not turn her into a symbol and ask her to forgive the company. He asked what she needed to make the restaurant safe. Maya named 3 things. Transparent tip records, a staff committee with real authority, and a rule that no manager could discipline an employee without written evidence and an independent.
A new chapter begins today. Integrity is the foundation of our house.
Review. Charles agreed to all 3. Nora asked for a 4th. Stop calling them hourly labor. They are people who keep your doors open. Charles added it to the policy. The investigation lasted 4 months. Victor was charged with theft and fraud. Martin resigned before the board could remove him. The rival chain withdrew its offer. Several executives claimed they had not known what Victor was doing, and the company had to decide whether ignorance was an excuse or evidence of failure. Maya did not return to the Lantern House as a waitress. She returned as the first staff-elected operations partner. The title came with authority, a salary, and a seat at the meetings where decisions were made. She kept her apron in a drawer because she still liked serving the morning crowd twice a week. Charles continued to visit without an entourage. Sometimes he wore a suit. Sometimes he wore the old gray hoodie. Maya could identify him either way. One afternoon, she found him at the counter helping Eli build a cardboard bridge. The structure leaned dangerously to one side. "That bridge needs a stronger center," Maya said. "We are testing a theory," Charles replied. "The theory is that gravity will forgive you?" Ili longed. Charles smiled and handed Maya a strip of cardboard. She sat beside them. The lantern house was still imperfect. A new policy did not erase old fear overnight. Some employees remained cautious. Some guests never learned why the manager disappeared. The company had to rebuild trust one ordinary shift at a time. But the cameras no longer went dark at 11:17. The tip board displayed every number in clear handwriting. The staff committee met every Thursday. And on the wall beside the service station, Maya placed a framed copy of the receipt that had started the investigation. She did not frame it as a victory. She framed it as a reminder. The note said, "Please do not tell him I wrote this." Months later, Charles asked whether she regretted slipping it to a stranger in hoodie. Maya thought about the question while pouring coffee for an elderly couple. "I regretted being afraid," she said. "I did not regret telling the truth, even when the stranger turned out to be the owner. Especially then." Charles looked toward the framed receipt. I thought I was going undercover to find out who was stealing from my restaurant." "And what did you find?" "That the company was stealing from itself every time it rewarded silence." Maya placed a cup in front of him. "That sounds like something an owner would say." "I'm trying to become one." She studied him. "You already own the place. Ownership is not the same as responsibility." For a moment, neither of them spoke. Outside, the city moved through another ordinary afternoon. Delivery trucks rolled past. A child pressed a hand against the window. The neon lantern above the door flickered, then steadied. Charles lifted his coffee. Maya lifted hers. The restaurant had once been built to make people feel important when they entered. Now try to make them feel seen before they left. And somewhere behind the counter, under the sound of plates and conversation, a new receipt printer began to hum. Maya tore off the first receipt of the evening and looked at Charles. "This one is not a warning," she said. "What is it?" "A reminder that the soup still does not judge people." Charles laughed. For the first time since he had inherited a company built on his father's name, he did not feel like a man hiding inside his own success. He felt like a man who had finally walked through the front door. And the woman who had slipped him a note about his manager was the reason he knew where to begin. The following morning, Charles found a second change waiting for him. Every employee had received a plain language statement showing exactly how tips, overtime, and complaints would be handled. The document was not written by a law firm. Maya and the staff committee had written it in the break room, line by line, until no one needed a manager to explain their own rights. Charles read it twice before signing. He understood then that reform was not a speech delivered in a boardroom. It was a form people could actually read, a number they could call, and a promise that would still exist when the person who made it was not watching. In the weeks that followed, Maya learned that accountability had a rhythm, just like a dinner shift. It began before the doors opened, when someone checked the tip ledger and asked whether the numbers made sense. It continued when a cook reported a broken freezer without fearing that the report would become a punishment. It appeared when a new server made a mistake and received a clear correction instead of a threat. These moments were small enough to escape a headline, but they were the moments that changed a restaurant. Charles attended the first staff committee meeting without a suit. He sat in the last chair and took notes while the employees argued about scheduling, breaks, training, and the way managers spoke to people during a rush. No one asked him to leave, but no one made room for his opinion either. He understood that this was not disrespect. It was the first honest meeting the company had held in years. Andre suggested a rotating closing captain so one person would not carry every unpaid task. Tasha proposed a written appeal process for workers who believed a schedule had been changed unfairly. Nora asked for a small emergency fund, so a sudden medical bill could not be used as a threat. Maya recorded every suggestion and divided the list into changes that could happen immediately and changes that required a vote. When the meeting ended, Charles offered to fund everything. Maya stopped him. She said money could solve a problem quickly, but a rule had to survive the person who paid for it. So the committee wrote the rules, the board approved them, and the staff received copies in plain language. For the first time, the people closest to the work shaped the system that governed it. A month later, a new employee asked Maya why the receipt was framed near the service station. Maya told her the note had not saved the restaurant by itself. A note was only paper. It became powerful because someone decided to believe the person who had written it, because witnesses came forward, and because the owner accepted that the truth might cost him comfort. The new employee looked at the receipt and then at the lit camera above the door. She nodded as if she understood. Maya returned to the coffee station. The morning crowd was arriving. Charles was carrying cardboard toward Eli's table. The Lantern House was not a perfect place, but it was no longer a silent one.